Aloha and welcome to Freedom Spirit Podcast with the Salty Soul. I am your host, Heather Young, here to share radically real and raw experiences as we bridge the gap between spirituality and the everyday aspects of entrepreneurship, relationships, and independent parenthood. Together, we'll explore the transformative power of personal and spiritual growth, all in service of uplifting humanity and raising the collective vibration of our planet. My mission is to inspire you to embrace your journey and create your own version of heaven on earth, because your evolution matters and the world needs your light. So let's dive in. So I want to ask this question in the very beginning of this podcast episode. How quickly can we sink back into peace and prosperity after turbulent times where it feels like we're being pushed to our edges and tempted to fall back into old ways? I want you to think about that. And while you're thinking about that, I want to tell you a story of a time when I had a conscious awareness, but felt like I forgot or fell back into a sleep state where I was being pulled back into emotional turmoil of the world and other people's emotions that were being directed at me, where I wasn't really balancing my inner and outer world and stopped focusing on growing my abundance consciousness after creating my first 6 figures in business. If you remember me talking about living close to the land, where I also tried to plant my own garden, which didn't go exactly as planned, but I tried my best. And I talked about that on episode 1. This is where I experienced such a different way of living and lifestyle, where I lived off-grid for 11 months in 2020, where me and my son moved into a tiny home that I called the Gypsy Camper that was on a slice of sacred Hawaiian land. And I was able to stay there for 11 months, which was amazing. In the amazingness of it all, it also felt like a moment of rock bottom for me, because of all the things that had led up to getting onto that piece of land was very, very difficult because of all the experiences and things that had happened that led me to being there. To give you some reference of what was happening then, I had done really well, created 6 figures in my business. I had decided to step away from that business because I felt the need create an online program and be a full-time coach online. And I invested the majority of my monthly income into a online mentor to help me. Ended up realizing that that was not the path I actually wanted to go down. But in the middle of switching directions, I was able to find out what it was that I didn't want to do, because I put myself in the arena. And yes, it was a really expensive mistake. But learning what it is that you don't want is just as important as learning and finding out what it is that you do want. In the midst of all of this, COVID was happening. I was going to court in order to get full custody of my son. I was also dealing with a mentally ill landlord who I had mentioned to her that we had been looking for a new place because we'd outgrown the small studio that we were in. She was really kind, really respectful. I really enjoyed her as a landlord. And the moment I told her that I was going to start looking for a new place once my lease was up, because I felt like the space had gotten too small for us and we'd outgrown it, she had completely flipped her lid, flipped the script, and told me that if I wasn't going to be out of her rental by the end of the month, which is illegal, that she would take away my child. And I thought it was absolutely insane that somebody would say that to especially another mother, knowing that she was a mother. I thought to myself, I'm going to be the one to end this, because I had heard that she preyed on other independent mothers to get them into this rental and then do whatever she did. But in this case, there was actually some truth that was in it, because her twin sister was the head of CPS, supposedly. I got out of there very quickly, realizing that I was dealing with somebody who was not good for my mental health or physical well-being or for my son. So I left and I went to the land that we lived on for 11 months. And sure enough, I found out the next lady who moved in, she was an independent mother. I don't know what happened between the two of them. The landlord ended up taking away her child. And she did get her child back. I heard about this later after walking through a grocery store and having a woman stop me asking if my name was Heather, and she had told me the full story that she was the next mother who moved in after I left. And I was just really sad for not only the mothers that had gotten into this place and had to deal with this woman, but I also felt this compassion for her, because later I did find out that this woman actually had her children taken from her at a really young age. And it was almost like she was getting revenge on other independent mothers because of the pain that she felt inside. And so I was just really grateful that I got out of there. And I feel like in those moments of feeling rock bottom, I had done all this internal work, all of this growth, and it literally felt like everything that I had created was literally going backwards. That year in 2020, we had an intense amount of rain that year during the rainy season that created a rushing river of water that flooded the entire road into our property, and it came all the way down to where the camper sat. And not only was it already difficult getting to and from the bathroom that was about 500 yards from where our home sat, but doing that with a child on my back in the middle of the night, alone in muck boots, wading through the mud, made it so much more difficult. And it's so funny looking back on that time of life now, because I can see how the mud was like the focus of my frustration, but it was also growing a lotus in the mud. I had grown and learned so much during those times of difficulty, and it truly was an opportunity for growth for me that helped me blossom into something and someone. I don't feel like I would have the resilience and the level of gratitude that I have now. And I realized that the more challenges I faced, that I was calling for even more gratitude to flush out the feelings of why me, or why is this happening? I had so much to be grateful for. And since I no longer had Wi-Fi and a spotty cell phone connection, I decided to get a job, because I was no longer working online, where a ton of my friends were all going back to work. They were all going to help reopen a resort hotel after COVID. And I got hired on the spot and found myself doing the exact thing I never dreamt myself of doing. And I would be working a job for the next couple of years to pay the bills and putting my son in daycare and paying a babysitter to put him to bed at night while I went to work. And to be totally honest, this was literally like a scene out of my nightmares. During this time of almost this amnesia that I felt, it did align with my values. It aligned with who I was and what I was doing at that time. And it helped me to wake back up to the reality of my path, that I knew where I was going and who I was becoming. But it took this to wake me up. And the important thing that I realized here was that need to know who I was, where I was going, what my path was, and actually judging it. When I came back into not needing the need to know, and just trusting the process and being who I was in every moment, regardless of the job that I was in, and quit judging myself for and just being in the moment. That is truly when the magic started to happen, when I released and relinquished the need to know who I was, where I was going, what I needed to be doing, and just trusting that no matter where I was always on the right path. And after those 11 months on the property, I was invited to rent a room to be in a community living situation. I started associating with people who didn't see the world as I saw it. And soon I allowed my abundant mindset and vibration to be reduced to what I was being surrounded by. And I slowly but surely started drinking again, especially at the beginning of the starting of my new job, where I would be serving alcohol near the pool. And on day one of training, we were all instructed to try the entire wine list and every cocktail on the menu. And it was not a short list. I remember leaving my first training that day feeling a little buzzed. And I was surrounded by people who were drinking in the new place that I was living. And it's not that it got out of hand, but the fact that I allowed it back into my life after setting boundaries and deciding to leave it behind, it slowly crept back in. And completely let go of my daily rituals, including prayer. Although I had an incredible exercise routine, like I'll tell you, I was, out there probably going too hard, but my inner world started to fade away. everyone has a different belief, name, way of communicating to this unseen energy and grace of what I personally call God. Some people call it spirit, the divine, the universe, a higher power. The list goes on and on. Essentially, it's all the same thing. In my entire life up until the age of 12, I was raised in an LDS upbringing where I would then take a step back from the religion after attending a different religion for the first time at a really young age, feeling the spirit within me so deeply like I had never experienced it before. It literally laid me out we were like at this church in this gym. Everyone was in there singing, and I just felt this spirit so deeply that I was literally like laid out on the gym floor one evening where I had dozens of people placing their hands on me, and I just like cried uncontrollably, loud, hard, and for a long time. And that was when I started to question what made one certain religion right and the others false. And to be able to start questioning that at such a young age, I began going down a path of self-reflection and realization in those early years. And just now in my 30s, I'm finally coming back to a deeper understanding of faith that has been developed and equally distributed between oneself and the higher power of God. And I'm not going to get into religion on this podcast because I'm not religious and decided not to be at a very young age. Religion can be a great thing for many people, and it is what created the foundations for me when I was younger that I am forever grateful for. And it's not something that I'm here to preach about, but I will say that your faith and strengthened relationship between your own intuition and your connection with God is what has been a true game changer for me in this game that we call life. When I was working with clients around the world after becoming a spiritual life coach and asking them what they felt most resonant with before sessions in terms of words, rather than coming up with 7 or 8 different options for them to choose, I decided to use just one name that I believe I coined the name. I don't know if I did, but is the universal divine spirit of God. So one day, as I was laying on the kitchen floor on my yoga mat in at least at a level of 10 of excruciating lower back pain from my intense workouts that I mentioned I was doing, my 5-year-old son came and laid next to me as he held my hand, and he caressed the side of my face saying, "I'm here for you, Mama. It's all gonna be okay." And he jumped up and ran over to the couch, grabbing a blanket and a pillow to get in a more comfortable long-term position on the floor next to me. I told him I was going to be okay. Without thinking twice, he quickly said, "Let me say a prayer." And as he started to pray and ask God to help his mom to feel happy, to take the pain away and to help her, expressing to God the love that he felt towards spirit, he finished by saying, "Amen." I watched him carefully with every powerful word as a sweet child spoke. As my heart melted, I was in awe of his faith and relationship that he'd begun to cultivate with this higher power, the universal divine spirit of God. Remembering that children are watching every action that we take as parents. And each prayer that I say, he is learning to cultivate that faith in him. And so after this, I quickly said a prayer for him when he was finished, because he also wasn't feeling 100% and his tummy was hurting and he had a little bit of a fever that day. So about an hour later, we decided to get some fresh air. We went to the beach, and I had completely forgotten about the pain that we were both in. And I said, "Hey, remember that prayer that you said about removing the pain from my back?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "The pain is completely gone." And he goes, "What? Wow. I didn't know that really worked." And I said, "Yes, it absolutely does work, but it's our job to ask and to have faith that it will work. And the days that it doesn't work right away, right when you want it to, you need to remember to have the patience, because it will happen or something better when it's supposed to." And that is truly the special thing about divine timing, that it will always happen when it's meant to happen. And soon after, in that moment when we were on the beach talking about how prayer works and the power of it, he says, "Mom, my tummy pain went away too." He's like, "Both of our prayers work." He was so excited and blown away about the power of prayer, the power of not only faith, a deep knowing that in prayer and ceremony is something that is always by your side to help you quickly sink back into peace and prosperity. My new book, Awakening on the North Side, A Guide to Bravery and Soul Growth, is now available on 10 different platforms online, as well as my author website. The books purchased on my author website will be a limited edition that will be hand signed and sent out to you. I will leave the link in the show notes below if you want to grab a copy. And I ask you to please leave a review regardless of where you've purchased or picked up a copy of my book on Amazon. I would absolutely appreciate that. And until next time, take care of yourself and aloha.